This update is all about one of the most popular groups of upgrades, ignition mods. The first part I tried out is a red hot ignition coil from Scrappy Dog Scooters. They had this and an orange coil, but their ad said this one is hotter. I picked it up for about $20 from their eBay store. To install the coil, begin by removing the spark plug wire from the plug. Then trace the spark plug wire from the engine and you'll find the coil. You may have to remove body panels or the seat bucket for access. Pull back the cover and disconnect the two wires from your stock coil. Take out the bolt that secures it to the frame and set the stock coil aside. Bolt the new coil to the frame so that it faces the same way the old coil did. Now connect the two wires and replace the cover. Normally it's green to the green terminal and black and yellow to the black terminal. I hooked my coil up this way initially but had no spark. I needed to reverse the connections for the red hot coil to work. Route the plug wire to the spark plug and push the cap on. Secure any loose wires so they won't contact hot or moving parts, and you're done. Before any riding, I wanted to see if I could tell a difference in the spark that the stock and red hot coils produced. I tried each one first with a spark plug, but I couldn't tell any difference. Then I hooked each to an HEI tester. It's basically like a spark plug, but with a very large gap that requires more voltage to jump. The red hot coil misfired or produced sparks that I couldn't see until I looked at the video, while the stock coil produced a strong, consistent spark. I found that the plug wire was loose on the red hot coil and tightened it to no avail. I also tried an NGK cap and another wire, but nothing changed. This was enough to convince me that I would rather use a stock coil and keep the red hot for a backup or for troubleshooting. I started trying out CDIs next. I bought two different CDIs from Scrappy Dog Scooters. They list the orange CDI as a performance CDI and the blue one as a racing CDI. The ad claimed a 5 to 10% increase in acceleration and top speed for the orange CDI. The listing for the blue CDI said it has a more aggressive ignition advance curve and recommends it for the serious build. Definitely claims worth testing since I picked up the pair for roughly $40. CDI installation is very simple. Start out by locating your stock CDI. I leave a few panels off of mine because I work on it so much, but you may have to remove the seat or body panels on a lot of models to access the CDI. Once you find it, pull it straight up so the rubber piece slides off of the frame mount. Unplug the two connectors from the stock CDI. Pry the tabs out on the CDI very gently as you pull lightly on the connectors. It doesn't take much force and you don't want to break any tabs. The orange CDI already has a rubber strap to go over the frame mount, but the blue one doesn't. You can remove the rubber piece from the stock CDI and slide it onto the blue racing CDI. Now push the connectors from the scooter into the new CDI and slide it over the frame mounting tab. You may need to secure the wires on models like the blue one. Sometimes RPM will be high after installing a CDI with advanced timing. You may need to adjust the idle speed screw once the scooter warms up. A lot of people replace the stock CDI when their new scooter doesn't go as fast as they expect, assuming it must be restricted. If you have a tach, it's not hard to check the rev limit. I secured the scooter with a rear wheel off the ground and revved over 11,000 RPM with a stock CDI. That's way more RPM than any normal build should need. Next, I used the timing light to check the curves of all three CDIs. Take a look at the flywheel first. The F mark is where base timing is expected to be. Max timing should be somewhere between the two marks to the right of the F mark. The farther the marks are clockwise on the flywheel, the farther ignition timing is advanced. I used the timing light to note ignition timing every 500 RPM and made a graph of all three CDIs for comparison. The biggest difference in the curves is how the stock CDI has very little advance under 3000 RPM, only 11 degrees, while the blue and orange CDIs have 25.5 and 26.5 degrees of advance right at idle. This is why you may need to lower the idle speed with a new CDI. The most noticeable side effect of a lot of advance at low RPM for me was hard starting. Here's a cold start using the stock CDI. Now here's a cold start with a blue racing CDI. The orange CDI had the same problem. Not a big deal in warm weather with a good battery and a scooter that's in tune. It could be a problem in less than ideal conditions though. The next thing we can see on the timing graph is that beyond 4000 RPM all of the CDIs are pretty close. The blue and stock CDIs meet up at 25 degrees of advance and the orange CDI stays at 26.5 degrees. They all taper off and even out at 24 degrees by 8500 to 9000 RPM. It seems a little strange to me that all of these CDIs work at the same advance at that point, and my timing light was acting a little funny at high RPM, so I'm not sure if these figures are totally accurate. I tried multiple times and saw the same numbers each time, so these are the best numbers I can give you, but don't take them as gospel. I took a 30-mile test ride with each CDI to compare results. Cruising speed and RPM remain the same across the board. Max speed I believe to be more influenced by minor differences in riding conditions. I find this much variance in max speed over multiple rides with the same setup. I can't really say I felt much difference between them. I thought the aftermarket CDIs felt slightly better at times, but I couldn't swear that it wasn't just wishful thinking. 0 to 30 mile per hour runs have been the best indicator of performance so far in the project, so let's look at those. Since CDIs can be changed quickly, I did all of the test runs at one time. I did 4 runs with one CDI, pulled over and switched to another, and did 4 runs, then repeated the process for the last CDI. I knew results would be close, so I wanted to eliminate as many variables as possible between runs. The stock CDI averaged 18.62 seconds. Runs with the orange CDI averaged 18.28 seconds, and the blue CDI averaged 18.43 seconds. These results show that there is indeed some improvement over the stock CDI, and it appears that the orange CDI is the winner, coming in roughly 1/3 of a second quicker than the stock and over 1/10 quicker than the blue racing CDI. If you watched the last update of Project TaoTao, you know that I had a bunch of CVT troubles. The one good thing about the issues is that I ended up doing 4 different sets of 0 to 30 mile per hour runs with the CDIs. When times from all runs are used, the stock CDI averages 19.16 seconds to 30. The orange CDI averages 18.86 seconds, and the blue CDI averages 18.84 seconds. This data still shows that both CDIs will outperform the stock CDI, even if not by a lot, but now the performance and racing CDIs are basically equal. I tend to believe the larger sample size and think both aftermarket CDIs offer similar gains. Around 0.3 of a second isn't bad for something so affordable and easy to install. The major problem for me is hard starting from the high advance at low RPM. Now I'll show you a mod that may provide the best of both worlds. As the flywheel rotates, the reluctor passes the pickup. This sends a trigger signal to the CDI so it knows when to fire. The CDI can use different amounts of delay to change exactly when it fires. We can't easily change how the CDI works without swapping in another as shown or being an electronics whiz. What we can do pretty easily is to change the location of the pickup relative to the reluctor. The flywheel rotates clockwise when the engine is running. If the pickup were relocated counterclockwise, the reluctor would pass it a little further ahead of when it normally would and subsequently trigger the CDI earlier than usual. The CDI still delays the spark just the same as when the pickup is in its standard position, but the whole process happens earlier relative to the crankshaft. That means the timing is advanced. Unfortunately, the pickup can't be moved much as it is, but we can fix that. To start, you'll need to remove the side cover. And once you've got all those bolts out and this bracket's loose, you should be able to just pull this cover out a little bit and pull it off. Once you get that cover off, you can see your pickup and the mount here. All you would have to do is remove these two bolts. I've already got mine loose, but remove these two bolts and you can pull that out, and you could actually modify it from here. But you can see there's not really a whole lot of slack. I can't do much even with this. I can't get it very far away from the engine. You could definitely work on it this way, but I do have the tools to take it apart the rest of the way, so I'm going to go ahead and take the flywheel off, the fan and the flywheel, and take the whole assembly off. I've got my pickup up here out of the way. Now I'm going to take these 4 bolts off that secure the fan to the flywheel, and you'll just want to hold on to the flywheel while you loosen the bolts. Once you've got the fan off, then you need to take the flywheel off, and this is where you're going to need some special tools. First, you've got to get the nut off, and that's either going to take an impact with a 14mm socket, or you can use one of these spanner tools to lock into the flywheel here while you hold it, and then use a ratchet and 14mm socket to take it off. But one way or another, you got to get that off. Impact is the easiest. And once you get that nut off, unfortunately the flywheel doesn't just pull off easily. You actually need a special tool. You need a flywheel puller to remove it. You can get these in different styles. I actually like the one here a lot better, but unfortunately I don't have one for this engine. But you can pick them up on eBay and from a lot of different sellers. So you'll see that your flywheel actually has threads inside here, and your puller has threads on the outside of it. So you just thread your puller into the flywheel. In this case it actually threads in like normal. It goes right hand. Thread that in until it's snug, and then you should have a bolt or some kind of T-bar like I showed you on this one here, and you'll screw this one in till it's tight. You're going to end up needing a ratchet or whatever it takes to turn this. So put that in place, and then you have to hold the base of the puller with a wrench while you tighten that the rest of the way, and then you can hear your flywheel pop, and then it comes right off. Once the flywheel's out of the way, you'll be able to see the stator, but before you remove that from the engine, you'll want to trace the wires coming out of it all the way up and find your connectors. That may be a little harder if you don't run around with no panels like I do. Now go ahead and disconnect those. Now take a look at this wire just for reference, so you'll know where to put it when you put it back on. Then you can take these 2 bolts out and remove the stator. You can see it comes right off. And pull this little wire out of the tab up there, and you should be able to take the whole thing off the scooter. Once you've got the stator and pickup off, you've got plenty of room to work on it. And the only part you really need to mess with is here, the pickup. What you want to do is the flywheel turns clockwise, so you want to move this counterclockwise so you're advancing the timing. So to do that, you need to be able to elongate these holes so that you can slide it a little bit. Hopefully you can see there's a mark on here. You want to elongate them that way so you can move it counterclockwise. Hopefully you can see you don't have a lot of excess material here, so you can only move it maybe a millimeter or 2, but that should be enough to give us at least a couple degrees of timing. You could use something like a small file that'll fit through the hole, but what I'm going to do is use a Dremel with a little carbide bit on it. Remember, when you do this, you want to elongate it only this way. You don't want to work the other side. As long as you leave this side intact, you can slide it against that side and put it back to stock timing if you need to. There's what it should look like with both sides done. After the pickup's modified, you can take the stator, slide it back over the crankshaft, line the bolt holes up here. Remember, you should have looked at your wire routing before to see how that went behind there. Get it how it was, and you should have this little grommet in the top. Go ahead and slide that into place and put your stator out of the way. Then you can install the 2 bolts that hold the stator to the engine. After you've got your stator tight, then go ahead and grab your pickup and find the 2 bolts to secure it, and just put those in there loosely. Now I've got both bolts in kind of loose, and I'm holding it where it would be if it was mounted like stock. You can see it's kind of centered in this little cutout here, but since we've elongated the holes back there, now we can slide it. You want to slide it all the way over as far as you can get it this way. And then once you get it slid over there, hold it in place and then tighten those two bolts. Now that the pickup's tight, I'm going to take my flywheel and slide it onto the crankshaft, and you should notice you've got a little keyway in the flywheel and it'll line up with the key on the crankshaft. So just go ahead and slide that on and then start the nut. Now you'll need to tighten the nut down. I'm going to go ahead and use an impact wrench with a torque stick. You can also use the spanner and tighten it down by hand if you choose with a torque wrench. After the flywheel's tightened up, then you should check the clearance between the reluctor, which is this little raised bit on your flywheel here, and the pickup itself. So just rotate the flywheel around so the raised part is underneath of the pickup, and then it should be about a credit card's width apart. So if you got an old credit card, just slide it through there. You can see there's a little resistance, something roughly like that. If it's too far out, then you're going to need to loosen these up and try to push it down a little bit, or you may have to rework the holes that you made there so that it can travel further down. And of course, if it's too close, then it'll hit. So again, you'll need to move that around or rework it, whatever you need to do. Install the fan, and all you've got to do is line up these 4 bolts with the 4 threaded holes in there and then tighten those down. Now you can slide the fan cover back on underneath that bracket, make sure everything's lined up, and then start installing all your screws and bolts. After that's tight, connect your wires and then make sure they're secured to the frame.
The pickup mod gave me 2 degrees of advance. Using the stock CDI, timing at low RPM is 13 degrees, then climbs to 27 degrees by 4,000 RPM before gradually falling to 24 degrees by 8,500 to 9,000 RPM. The free mod is giving me more advance than any of the CDIs I had to pay for without any of the starting issues. I went out to do the 0 to 30 mile per hour runs first, and revs dropped by 200 to 300 RPM on the ride. I did the 0 to 30 mile per hour runs anyway. Even running at lower RPM, the average time was right with the most recent aftermarket CDI results. I checked everything over and found that the NCY contra spring needed about 7 pounds less to compress it than when I tried it new. I went from 5.5 gram sliders to 5.25 gram sliders, and RPM was back to where it started, so I went for a 30-mile ride. Everything was spot on with the other runs I did earlier. It looks like it's going to take a more substantial gain to raise cruise speed or max speed by very much. I gave the 0 to 30 runs another try and everything went well this time. The 4-run average of 17.76 seconds is just over half a second quicker than the runs with any CDI I tried. I wish there wasn't the indiscretion from the ever-changing CVT situation, but it did perform well both ways that I ran it. I'm sold on the pickup mod, and I'll be leaving it as is with the stock CDI. Before I wrap up the update, I want to say that these results could be way different depending on your stock CDI. If your stock CDI is restricted, you can see big gains from even an unrestricted stock replacement. Not all stock CDIs will have the same curve or timing as mine either. No matter what kind of timing mod you're doing, listen and look for signs of spark knock. It can often be heard sounding like a knock inside of the engine, and you may see peppering of the spark plug. If you think you're experiencing detonation, back off of the timing and or increase fuel octane, as it could lead to engine damage. Please like and subscribe for more, and thank you for watching.